Bill Mattingly, CNN.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 37 quick, I'm kidding. Sir, at a fundraiser last month, you said, quote, the rest of the world is looking at this election, both the good guys and the bad guys. You noted you're going to the G20 in a couple days. You'll come face to face with many of those leaders, the same moment that your predecessor is considering launching his re-election effort. How should those world leaders, both good guys and bad guys, view this moment both for America and for your presidency?
Well, first of all, these world leaders know we're doing better than anybody else in the world, as a practical matter. Notwithstanding the difficulties we have, our economy is growing. You saw the last report. We're still growing at 2.6%. We're creating jobs. We're still in a solid position. And there's not many other countries in the world that are in that position. And I promise you, from the telephone calls I still have and from the meetings I have with other heads of state, they're looking to the United States and saying, how are you doing? What are you doing? What can we do together? So I think that the vast majority of my colleagues, at least those colleagues who are NATO members, European Union, Japan, South Korea, et cetera, I think they're looking to cooperate and wanting to know how we can help one another. And what was the other question? Oh, I'm sorry.
No. So I think one way I would follow up on that is you noted that you felt like there was a shift in terms of people being willing to show more decency in this moment. You've often talked about breaking the fever or kind of a transition from this moment that we've faced over the last several years. Do you feel like the election is what represents that? Do you feel like the fever is broken, I guess?
Well, I don't think we're going to break the fever for the super mega MAGA Republicans. I mean, but I think they're a minority of the Republican Party. I think the vast majority of the members of the Republican Party, we disagree strongly on issues, but they're decent, honorable people. We have differences of agreement on issues. But they, I work with a lot of these folks in the Senate and the House for a long time, and they're honest and they're straightforward. They're different than mine, but they're decent folks. And so I think that the rest of the world, and a lot of you have covered other parts of the world, and you know, the rest of the world is looking at the United States. I guess the best way to say this is to repeat what some of you heard me say before. The first G7 meeting for the public, that's the 7 largest democracies, when I went to, right after we got elected in February, after I got sworn in January. And I sat down at a table, a round table, with the 6 other world leaders from the European Union and Canada, et cetera, and said, America's back. And one of them turned to me and said, for how long? For how long? It was a deadly earnest question. For how long? And I looked at them, and then another one went on to say, and I'm not going to name them, went on to say, what would you say, Joe, if in fact we went to bed tonight here in England, woke up the next morning and found out that 1,000 people had stormed the Parliament of Great Britain, gone down the hall, broken down the doors, 2 cops ended up dying, a number of people injured, and they tried to stop the confirmation of an election. It's not the same situation, obviously, as we have. And he said, what would you think? And I asked a rhetorical question, what would you all think? You'd think England was really in trouble. You'd think democracy was on the edge if that happened in Great Britain. And so that's the way people were looking at us, like, when's this going to stop? Nothing like this has happened since the Civil War. I don't want to exaggerate, but literally, nothing like this has happened since the Civil War. And so what I find is that they want to know, is the United States stable? Do we know what we're about? Are we the same democracy we've always been? Because, look, the rest of the world looks to us. I don't mean that we're always right. But if the United States tomorrow were to, quote, withdraw from the world, a lot of things would change around the world. A whole lot would change. And so they're very concerned that we are still the open democracy we've been, and that we have rules and the institutions matter. And that's the context in which I think that they're looking at, are we back to a place where we are going to accept decisions made by the court, by the Congress, by the government, et cetera?
So the entire genesis of that G7 conversation was tied to your predecessor, who is about to launch another campaign. So how do you reassure them, if that is the reason for their questioning, that the former president will not return, or that his political movement, which is still very strong, will not once again take power in the United States?
Well, we just have to demonstrate that he will not take power by, if he does run, making sure he, under legitimate efforts of our Constitution, does not become the next president again. Steve, Reuters, I'm